Hey everybody, this is Ted Forbes and welcome to the vlog. And today I want to talk to you guys about a concept called the Muse Business. And the Muse Business is something that I first heard of many years ago when I first read Tim Ferriss's The 4-Hour Workweek. And I want to talk about the Muse Business because my definition has really kind of morphed and changed over the years, and I've done several of these. And I think it's important because I think this is something that maybe you might be interested in putting into your own life and putting into action because I think there's a lot you can benefit and gain from it. Now, my definition, like I said, has changed, but let me start with Tim's. And in the book, The 4-Hour Workweek, the Muse Business is presented as basically something where you're going to start a business that you're going to be very smart about and efficient with and do something very simple that fulfills a need, has good marketing around it, is well promoted, and it essentially will allow you to have automated income with very low maintenance, and it allows you to spend your time doing something else like goofing off or traveling or starting another business or whatever, but you have this stream of income that's coming in. And while there's nothing wrong with that definition, at face value there, I think that, there is kind of a promise of the silver bullet of, here's how you can be lazy for a living. And I've seen people that have put this into action exactly as prescribed, and they get too lofty a goal with that, and what ends up happening is they have a mess on their hands that not only takes up all of their time, but they lose money on, or it's extremely, consuming on many levels, emotionally and financially and as far as energy goes. And so, I want to get away from that a little bit, but my definition morphed, and the main reason is because a lot of times I found this to be a really interesting solution to address problems where I have holes in my skills or learning or knowledge. And so, for instance, let's say you want to get better at marketing, or you want to get better, there's some aspect of what you do that you want to improve, some part of your skill set. What's really cool is doing a Muse Business where this becomes a formal entity on the side that you may or may not make money with. If you lose money, it's not the end of the world, you're not out a whole lot of money, but if you make money, sometimes it can be pretty good, and sometimes it can snowball into becoming a real thing, and you never know. But the most important part either way is that you're learning something new that is then applicable to things you're already doing. And like I said, I've done several of these over the years. I'll give you an example of one that actually turned into a thing, was when I started The Art of Photography, which is the show that I do full-time. And that started at the time I was working for an employer that wanted me to do more video-related projects. And I had very little experience with video. I'd always wanted to do it. I'd been a photographer. I had experience with stills, but I'd never done motion before. And so that was one thing that was really important to me. So I started The Art of Photography on the side, unbeknownst to my boss. I was not required to. It was just something fun that I wanted to do. And it was some little place that was mine where I could make my mistakes, and I could, if I goofed it up, whatever, I could do all that there. So when I came to work, my game was on, I was more polished, and I was able to do things more flawlessly and not make mistakes, basically. And The Art of Photography kind of grew and grew and grew. I was originally only going to do 10 videos, and that was going to be it. Well, then I did another 5 because it was kind of catching on, then I did some more, and then here we are years later. And I actually quit my job to do this full time. So a Muse Business can be successful like that. I've had other things that I've done where maybe they're not that successful, but I've never really lost money on one, although conceivably if I did, it wouldn't be a lot that I'd ever put into it. But it's something where I can sharpen some kind of skill. And I think this is important because for me, and I think for a lot of people, when you're focusing on something, especially if you're talking about a skill, something like marketing, where you're having to do things in addition to the core of your business. Now, most of us try, I think, or aspire in life to pick things that we're interested in to do for a vocation. And let's say that's photography, or let's say that's making videos, or let's say that's running a business, or whatever that is. And sometimes we get so tied to the little details and so close to the metal and the little things that don't make that big of a difference because we're being perfectionists at what we do and we care about it, that we don't see the bigger picture. And so something like marketing, that's really a side skill to have on this, begins to fall away a little bit. And you're going to, unless you have the skills or know somebody who does marketing and you're willing to pay that person, your business will suffer as a result. So that's just one example. So I think there's all kinds of things that you can learn from doing things. Maybe it's not a business that actually makes money. Maybe it's just a hobby or something that you're doing to sharpen your skills. Now, I do think that the money thing does put a little more stake into it. You don't want the stakes so high that it's a source of stress for you, but money can give you a little bit of an incentive to go. I mean, when I did The Art of Photography originally, that was not an incentive, it was just to do video. But once I realized that I could sell advertising and I did have an audience and there were things that I could do with that, it did change the game on that because it put more stakes into it and it made it more of this thing to try to aspire to do. And I'm very lucky to have recently been able to do that. So anyway, even if you're just making a little bit of money, sometimes that does make a difference. So what I would think is if you were considering starting a Muse Business for yourself, one, I would pick something that you're interested in, but not something that you're is your total passion. And the reason is because at the very best, I think you're going to get out of this is you're going to learn from it. And what I would do is pick something you're interested in, but if you're doing it full time, what you don't want to do is get bogged into those details, like, working on body copy too much or polishing things, or, if you're doing a photography website and you're a photographer and you're trying to sell your prints and you're not really working on the selling, but you're really working on making beautiful prints. There's nothing wrong with that, but that's not the point of the Muse business. The point of the Muse business is to break away from that and learn the new skills. So that's one thing I would do. Pick an interest, but just make it something that's not too close to home. The second thing I would do is try to figure out where you want to go with it that's not going to be too lofty. Realize that very realistically, there are going to be most weeks where you only have a couple hours during the week to put into this as far as time goes. So you want to make that time very meaningful. We all have lives, we all have friends, we have families, and we have things that we do outside of work that consume more time. We have interests, and that's what makes us human beings, and there's nothing wrong with that. But just know that efficiency is going to have to come into play. There will be a week here where you're going to be able to, maybe you have a day off from work or something, and you'll be able to spend a lot of hours on your Muse business, and that's great. Capitalize on that time. But just know going in that you're going to have a lot of weeks where it's 1 to 2 hours, maybe 3 hours at the very most. And it's really important to keep it in perspective of, I'm going to be efficient, but don't make it too crazy. It needs to be something you can do. So that's the second thing I would do. And then the third thing I would do is start with a basic spreadsheet and go from there. You want to come up with your business materials, so you want to have your goals written out. You want to be able to see things from a very high level and look down and see the big picture and, okay, so this is what I am doing here. I have this little thing that I'm going to do, and this is the ultimate goal. Is that too a realistic goal? Is it too crazy? And how do I get there? And how can we, bridge it? Or maybe you break that up and say, ultimately, it would be great to have this, a full running business with a company and people and all this. But what are some things you can do in between to make that grow gradually? And then what you're going to work on is from step 1 to step 2. Okay, I am here with nothing and I'm starting this business, and I've determined this step can get me to the final. So that's my Muse business. And so you want to make it something that's doable like that, and start to grow, and then start keeping those spreadsheets on goals and checking in and checking yourself and seeing if you're doing them. It's also really important to dissolve these down to a real macro level where you're looking at a set of tasks. And so if it's a website-based thing, let's just say I got to have my website up, I got to have this, I got to have that, and you're not going to spend too much time on those things. They have to be good enough and they have to be up. You can polish and massage later, but the whole thing is to keep efficiency going, keep things doable, and keep your momentum going. And let's say we can't work on it for a few days, we pick right back up where we left off. But that's the interesting thing about a Muse business. And the whole idea here is that you're going to have something on the side that can generate income, but it doesn't take all of your time. And I think that's the important part of it. And like I said, I've had several of these going on throughout the years, and some of them done better than others, obviously, but I always learned something from it, and it's just become a little side hobby of what I do to sharpen my own skills. I think not only just, in what I do artistically, but what I do from a business standpoint too. And I think that's really important, particularly for somebody like me who's more of the creative side, and we are kind of stereotypically really bad at the business side. So this is a way of sharpening a lot of those things up. So anyway, something to think about. I hope you consider doing something like this for yourself. That is the Muse business. And until next time, I'll see you in the next video. Later.